And welcome everyone to Book Expo America 2013, to a program we call Self-Publishing, Disruptor or Defender of the Book Business. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Keneally. I'm Business Development Director for Copyright Clearance Center, based in Boston, Massachusetts, and very happy to have you join us for this special program live on C-SPAN 2. We're going to look at the way that self-publishing is driving itself into the traditional publishing business. And I'd like to start by asking you if you've read the latest report on the book publishing industry. The headline reads, well, it always reads, upheaval predicted. According to Belker, self-publishing is one of the fastest growing sectors in the publishing industry that is under such upheaval. With 211,000 self-published titles released in 2011, the most recent figures. That's a figure up more than 60% from only 133,000 titles in 2010. So in the hour ahead, roughly more than 24 new books will appear in the marketplace. And as I contemplate figures of that kind, I think of Mae West. But not for the reason you're thinking, not for the hourglass figure, but for something she said. She was, besides a fine actress, a really great author and had some wonderful lines. And one of the things she said was, too much of a good thing is simply wonderful. And I have to ask a question. When it comes to self-publishing and its effects on all of us, the ability that it gives us to express ourselves, is there really too much free speech? Can we ever have anything like that? It's a question I think we need to ask ourselves. And to help us answer that, we've got quite a panel. I'll start in the end with James McQuivey. James, welcome.
Thank you.
James is Vice President, Principal Analyst at Forrester Research, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He is the foremost analyst tracking and defining the power and impact of digital disruption on traditional businesses. And he is also author of Digital Disruption, which is out just now this spring from Amazon Publishing. Digital Disruption, Unleashing the Next Wave of Innovation. He published it himself in February. To James's right is Angela James. Angela James, welcome. Angela is Executive Director of Carina Press, Harlequin's digital-first imprint, where, as its motto proclaims, no great story goes untold. Founded in 2009, Carina Press releases ebooks weekly in a number of fiction genres, including romance, steampunk, gay lesbian fiction, and science fiction. And finally, to my left, Keith Ogora. Keith, welcome.
Welcome, Chris. Thank you.
Keith is Senior Vice President Marketing for the Indianapolis-based Author Solutions, which Penguin acquired in July 2012. ASI's self-publishing imprints include Author House, iUniverse, Trafford, and Ex Libris. The company also has strategic alliances with leading trade publishers such as Thomas Nelson and Hay House, as well as self-publishing imprints in the UK, Spain, Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. So really a well-qualified panel to talk about this issue. And I want to start with James McQuivey, and I suppose the advice you would give to book publishers today is disrupt thyself.
Absolutely it is. In fact, you opened the session by asking the question whether or not self-publishing was the disruptor or the defender of publishing, and I would actually contest the idea that it's either or. I actually think disruption is the best defense for publishing, and self-publishing is turning out to be a potential boon for publishers, because you can sit there and watch people market themselves, share their ideas, see which things gather any kind of momentum in the marketplace, and then make your offer. At that point where a lot of the risk is taken out, a lot of the market has already been built, the market that you're probably not going to have much money to spend to build anyway as a publisher in the modern world. So in fact, this is part of the best defense of the publishing world, to my mind, and all the industries I work with, turns out that digital disruption turns out to be a better friend than foe when all is said and done.
Well, it may not feel that way to a lot of people in publishing right now, so perhaps we should go into some of the definitions and to explain why that would be the case. What is there to make friends with? First of all, define this digital disruption. We've had disruptive changes in economies in the past, but this is something very special.
It is very special in that it's affecting every single part of the business, and this is true outside of publishing as well. But just if you think about what an industry has to do, it has to create from some raw material, some finished good. And that can be a service, it can be a product, whatever it is. It then has to distribute and market that, and then it has to support the customer. Well, what digital has done is created an infrastructure that makes every single one of those steps easier and faster and cheaper. And this is true across the board, whether you're Citibank or Random House. And it turns out that the consumer is ready for it. Let me give you an example of how ready. Go back to 2003, the 2-year mark for the iPod. Well, at that point, the iPod had sold, after 2 years, 1 million units. Now, back then, that was a big deal, and it was, oh, Apple has really changed the music business. Fast forward to the iPad, we're talking about a device that has sold 80 million units in its first 2 years and has gone on since then to now, after just over 3 years, to sell 140 million units. So that's not just because Apple is a really good marketer. That's because consumers like the fact that a digitally disrupted economy gives them more stuff, more options, more choice, more benefits, more easily than before. That's why this is special.
Right, and that speaks to the point as to why digital disruption has to happen in publishing, because it's happening everywhere else.
You don't really have a choice. The consumer wants a digitally disrupted life, and they'll go wherever someone gives it to them, as Amazon well knows.
Right, and you meet with a lot of companies, James, and help them evaluate their product lines and think about the future. How would you look at the book as a product today? And what are some questions you would ask if you were having a meeting at a publishing house?
Well, the book itself is a concept, not a thing. And this is a hard thing for anyone. You talk about branch banking, you talk about what is a retail store. It's hard to rethink those words because they are in such common use. I mean, books have been around now for half a millennium in terms of their printed ability, and they've gone far beyond that before mass printing was possible. So the idea of a book is fairly ingrained in who we are, especially those of us here in this room. But does it need to be? Can we rethink what a book is as we're rethinking what an author is, as we're rethinking what a publisher is? The answer is yes, we can, and yes, we should. But here's the idea. It's not just that we change, we take a book and we get rid of it and we replace it with an app or something like that. It's that we expand the notion of a book, make it include more concepts, more ideas, more processes, and ultimately outcomes. That's where we have to start. It's that fundamental a change.
Right. Keith Ogorek with Author Solutions, I read on your blog, Indie Writers, that you recently attended the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference, and you blogged about this second Gutenberg revolution. James alluded to the fact that the book's been around with us for 500 years, perhaps longer, in other forms. Why do you feel that this revolution, this particular moment in book publishing, is as revolutionary as when Gutenberg created the printing press?
Well, when you go back, actually, the title of the address I gave at the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference was the second Gutenberg effect. And the premise I set forth was that there was a shift in the authority and the ability of people to share ideas and impact other people with their content when Gutenberg first came out with his printing press. It had been restricted to, at that time, the institution, and to limited by the hand of scribes to actually share content. And if you go back and you just look from a historical perspective, Gutenberg saw his printing press as a way to not just expand what he saw as a Christian mission, but also just education in the middle class as a whole. And I think historians would agree with that. There was a power shift, an authority shift of who could do that. There's a phrase that he said in his one of his quotes about how that the words are no longer restricted by the, and I think he used the phrase, the palsied hand who grows tired, but now are set free by an untiring machine. And so that change in authority from institution to what became a publisher then set forth just a tremendous impact in culture. I would set forth that right now self-publishing has shifted the authority once again from the publisher to the author. Now that has both, as in all democracies, good things and bad things that have come about, but that's why I've called what self-publishing as the second Gutenberg effect. And the statement I made is that I think in time self-publishing will have as profound of impact on writing and authors and sharing of content as did Gutenberg's first printing press. But ironically, not much had changed in 500 years up until that point.
Right, and one of the other shifts that I've heard of as far as Gutenberg goes was it shifted money out of his pocket into the pockets of others because he died a bankrupt man. And I think it's an interesting lesson that while the printing press was invented at that point, we didn't really have a publishing business for nearly 150 years after that.
Yeah, he apparently wasn't a very good marketer himself because he should have protected Gutenberg as a name. But that's another panel, I think.
That's often the case, though. And what's interesting is that while this revolution is happening, Author House, Author Solutions, Author House, and the other imprints you've had began to lead it going back more than 10 years, but you were required, just